everyone. So today we're going to do a bit of a different video. We're not doing yoga, but we are teaching ourselves how to sustain ourselves. Part of my mission at Etheric Natural is not just to make you feel comfortable in the body, the only body that you're given, but it's also to help you connect and ground that body. And an excellent way of grounding is gardening. Now, this is the life that sustains us. Excellent way to tap into nature. If you're not gonna get out there and meditate, I'm not gonna force you, but a good way to meditate is to sit in the garden. No phone, no anything, no distractions, just you and nature. So today we're going to be discussing how to process and cure onions that have not bolted, but also how to process onions that have. This huge thing is a flower stalk that is sent through the onion. This happens due to stress mostly. Cold heat snaps will do it. These onions are a little bit more in the shade than these were, so that did result in them being a little more stressed. That stress sent them to seed. Basically what happens during those cold heat snaps is the onion thinks it's in the first cycle of its life as it's heading into spring, but then let's say it's February, we have a false spring, and then it all of a sudden snaps back to being 40 degrees. The onions will go into a state of dormancy in the cold. Then once the warmth comes back, the dormancy state is lifted, and the onion thinks it's in its second cycle of its life, which is when it's essentially dying, so it's sending off seed for its next generation. So there's ways to prevent it, though I unfortunately cannot control weather. So I've accepted that some of my onions have bolted, so the process is going to be a little different with those. But first we're going to handle these. These onions have not experienced any stress, and I'm handling them very gently because since they haven't cured, they're fresh from the ground. You don't want to wash off any of this dirt at all. We're going to go ahead and find a nice sunny spot, a nice sunny area for these to camp out at for a few days. And after they've dried for a few days, you see they're a bit papery. I was sure to not water my garden beds once I saw that my onions had developed a little more. You want that papery outside because really why we're processing these differently from these is because of the moisture content. This has a lower moisture content, though we want to be delicate with these bulbs as they are fragile. So if you ever had an icky onion in an onion bag that kind of has that bruised, translucent skin, it has a bit of an off smell. That is because the onion was not cured properly in this process. It was damaged in the process. So be very careful with these. But what we want to do is lay these outside in that sunny area for 2 to 4 days. Once these have properly dried out, you're going to notice that these green stalks are going to dry out and become yellowed and withered like that. This is what we want. We want these to dry out. And what we're going to do after that is to find a nice, temperate, cool, dark area in our house. A garage, a basement is perfect. And we're going to put these in one single layer on a rack so they can dry completely. And to supplement with that rack, it would be great to have like a fan in there if you happen to have some kind of ceiling fan in the area that you're going to have these camped out at. That's going to be perfect. So again, we're going to let these sit outside in the sun for a few days. Then we're going to bring them back inside, let them dry out completely on a few wire racks for about 2 weeks. This curing time is essential if you want the onion to be able to be stored for months and months on end. Those onions that we buy in the grocery store, we have to go through this curing process. Alright, so this is all my onions laid out into a layer. And again, these onion tops are going to become brown just like these and dry out. And by the end of this process, a few months down the line, the paper will be completely dry around the onion and the roots will be completely dried out and wiry. So this is the goal. Leave some of those onions. I'm not going to take every single onion that bolted because I do want some of them to set seed for next season. Though I'm going to take basically my biggest onions that have bolted and leave the rest in just for some further protection for the crops that I'm planting this summer, and as well as, of course, next year's harvest. So gonna go ahead and get these bolted ones out of the ground and we're gonna head inside. All right, bye. Hey everybody, so we made it back inside. What I did notice when I was going through all of the onions that had bolted were that they all happened to be red. So I just found that fascinating, something to think about if you're growing red onions, to pay attention to the weather, especially when it heads into that early spring season. That's when we get our false springs and those cold snaps. So yeah, just be wary of that, be cautious of that. Again, pretty much every single onion that bolted were red. But something else that I want you to notice is these onions that I picked. Look how outrageously huge this onion is. It's so, it's half of me, okay? So you would think that this bulb should be twice as big. But you see what happens when it sends out that flower stalk? It gives all of the energy into the flower stalk. So you know when you see those bolts that your bulbs aren't going to get any bigger. So you need to go ahead and pick them so you don't ruin the rest of your crop, especially if only a few are bolting. You know when they bolt and go to flower, they need to come out of the ground immediately and be used immediately. As I was mentioning before, the moisture content is different in the other onions that I have sitting out there right now. The moisture content is lower due to the fact that it has not sent off a flower stalk. This flower stalk, you know, this is the last of its life, so it basically gives all of its energy into this flower stalk. This is going to add way more moisture into the bulb as it's trying to support the flower stalk. This one's a bit wonky. You see, it's a bit gnarled into itself. But if I were to leave this in the ground, like I did with some of the other ones, I left them in the ground, let them set to seed. By the time it sets its seed and it's done for the season, that bulb in the ground more than likely would have rotted or decomposed in some kind of way. It's not really usable. This is why, you know, bolting, if you were producing in a more commercial rate, bolting is your #1 enemy, as it's going to make pretty much all of your crop virtually useless. Though, these are still edible. The flowers, the blooms are actually edible on onions. So I'm going to be utilizing this little bloom, even though it's like gnarled in there. Because this bloom here, if you ever seen like snowball flowers, those flowers that kind of look like fireworks when they're dried, that's in the Allium family. So is garlic, chives. They'll all send a similar flower, just like this. So what we're going to do here is go ahead and chop these up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the tops and the bottoms. I'm going to go ahead and lob off this green part, and I'm going to chop up this green part by itself. I'm going to actually put these little blooms in my bag. I like to have a little bag left over for waste that can be eventually processed into veggie stock. So that's going to go into my stock bag, my stockpile, and I'm going to go ahead and get all of these processed. So once I do that, I'm going to come back. All right, so now that I've got everything chopped up, I went ahead and chopped up the onion tops, which can be used very similarly to a green onion. You know, some people think the flavor is not as, you know, palatable, but I think it's fine. It's an oniony taste. It's not bitter or anything, so it definitely can be taken place for your raw green onion. Now, I'm not going to freeze all of them. This is what I'm gonna freeze. I didn't mention that. I'm gonna freeze this. Now you're completely welcome if you have a freeze dryer, if you have some dry ice near you available, go ahead and freeze dry them. I think freeze drying is far superior to dehydrating just because of the nutrients that you can retain. Though I don't personally own a freeze dryer. There's ways to do it just in the freezer, but I've watched a few videos that sort of debunked, like basically you're just freezing your food on a single layer. It wasn't actually doing the function of freeze drying, which is removing some of the moisture content as it's drying. If you don't have the option, you can just do what I'm doing. What I'm gonna do first is place this tray in the freezer. I'm gonna try to get it in as good of a single layer as I can and place this tray in the freezer and let it dry in a single layer before I go ahead and put them into freezer safe bags. Now for this one, I'm actually going to dehydrate it after I just talked junk about dehydrating. I'm going to dehydrate these and actually process it into onion powder. So I'm probably going to dehydrate these on the dehydrate function in my Ninja Foodie for about, I would say 6 to 8 hours. I'm just gonna check it and give it a squeeze and see if it's dry and crispy or if it still has some give, like there's some moisture in it. And again, I mentioned what I was gonna do with these. I'm gonna put these in my stockpile. I'm just gonna call it that, a stockpile. And yeah, just put them in stock. So nothing is being wasted. Also, let me mention that when I was processing my onions, I cut off the bottoms and I'm gonna go ahead and let this dry out. I have a dried one for you. Actually an onion that I got out of my garden. I accidentally knocked it out of place. You see how tiny it is compared to this one. Of course, some of the smallness is because it's shrank, because it's dried, but this was a considerably smaller onion. This was closer to like a leek. This is definitely more of an onion, though, you know, the bulb didn't expand on all of them, especially these ones because they had the flower growing from them. So yes, this is an excellent way to maintain your harvests. You don't have to go out each spring and buy a bunch of onion and garlic sets, buy a bunch of flowers. No, if you save things that can be repropagated into the crop, bingo bango, you got some free 99 onions. So yes, you can either get your seed, let your crop go to seed, or you can collect the bottoms of your onions. So with all that being said, I hope I clarified some things for you today. And I definitely will make another video checking in on the onions that I have curing outside. I will probably do a check-in in about a month or so because I want it to be more at that stage of maturity. And, you know, I'll make a quick video showing you how to do onion braids. So, I was gonna depart like Paula Deen. From my house to yours. Can I take that since she's canceled? I think I will. All right, from my house to yours. Enjoy.